we get a better sense of the truth. Let's begin by dissecting the news. In the past couple of weeks, efforts to unite the political opposition in the 2022 elections were hampered by infighting and, to a large extent, mistrust. Par for the course, really, when you talk of bringing together different political forces and personalities behind the singular goal of defeating either a Marcos or a Duterte in the presidential election. Now, over the weekend, the son of the late dictator met with the president's daughter, fueling talk even more that an alliance was in the offing, which now makes opposition unity even more urgent. But how close or far away is this from happening? Tonight we'll speak with senatorial candidate Neri Colmenares, who failed to get the 12th and final slot in the ticket formed by Vice President Leandro Bed. Be part of our discussion. Send us your questions and comments on our YouTube live chat or tweet us using the hashtag #ANCAfterTheFact. Joining us tonight is former Bayan Muna Party List representative and human rights lawyer Neri Colmenares. Good evening, sir, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good evening, Christian. Good evening po sa mga viewers ninyo.
Okay, first let's start with this meeting of yours with the Vice President. When did this happen, and who basically sought that meeting? Who arranged that?
Yes. Well, actually, it happened Friday, on the very day that they decided naman na si Sunny na ang 12 slot. That's when we also met with the Vice President. In fact, the issue of the slate was never an agenda. We never raised it. And also, in fairness naman to the Vice President, she also didn't raise naman our endorsement to her. Sabi niya, sige, I know may mga process kayo, so take your time. And ano naman, hindi naman parang siya mismo nagmamadali. So we just discussed the agenda. So doon lang the agenda ng platform and other issues and concerns. So well, we were the one who asked her. No? Matagal na rin kaming humihingi ng meet with her. In fact, last year pa, if you really were too technical. But the last meeting we had with her was during the wake of the former President Aquino and Ateneo. We were there. I was there and we spoke with her and nag-extend kami ng condolences sa Aquino family. But we also managed to talk with the Vice President. Sabi namin, VP, baka pwede na mag-usap. So sabi niya, yes naman, sorry, may COVID kasi at that time, so hindi siya nakaano. So anyway,
so how long was the meeting?
Oh, it wasn't that fast, huh? I mean, the meeting probably 1 hour and a half. And the good thing about the talk with the Vice President is ang agenda lang naman namin yung platform, di ba? So, handa siya. She read the Makabayan platform. At alam mo, ang Makabayan platform, very detailed yun eh. So, handa siya at may sinasabi siya na alam nyo, ako, I'm very, dito sa iba, okay na ako dito. Maybe let's discuss more on this. So medyo very upfront naman yung discussion. She was honest enough to say na ito parang hindi ko muna maaralin ko pa. So yeah, we took it as it is, no? Kung ano yung sinabi niya. Ang maganda naman at least nakapag basic na pagpaabot ng mga posisyon sa iba't ibang issue ng plataforma.
Okay, just to check the timeline, no? So your meeting with the Vice President happened after Attorney Sunny Matula was announced as
on the very day.
On the very day. Pero which came first, the meeting or the announcement of Attorney Matula?
The decision they had probably happened the day before, no? So they informed us na nirelay naman sa amin yung decision na yon. So when we went to the meeting, at least alam kasi namin hindi naman agenda namin yung 12 slots, so we didn't even bother to raise it. So pumunta kami doon for the discussion on the platform and the issues.
Okay,
so
we're going to take a quick break first because we need to fix the audio. After the fact, we'll be right back.
Okay, thank you.
How do you get the straight and silky hair you love?
To get my silky smooth hair, I blow dry it.
mobility will be key to recovery because we have relaxed some of our quarantine methods, no, and we have allowed more transportation to come out. That's going to prove to be better for demand. If we do follow the health protocols, the ability of people to move around will likely contribute better to growth.
Welcome back to After the Fact. We're still joined by senatorial candidate attorney Neri Colmenares. Okay, so before we took a break, we were talking about your meeting with the Vice President, and you said that meeting didn't touch on your possible endorsement of her presidential bid, as well as your possible inclusion in the 12th and final slot in her senatorial slate. Now let's talk about the areas, the portions of the Makabayan platform on which both of you agreed with the Vice President said that she could perhaps deliver if she gets elected. Dun muna po tayo.
Well, ang pinaka-major talaga namin, where we have most agreements talaga, is on accountability and justice and human rights. Doon, she was very clear naman na she will make sure na may accountability ang mga, violated rights or corruption for that matter, and all issues ng accountability in that sense. So, respect for human rights, of course. She mentioned that na hindi naman ito kapareho ng ganitong administrasyon ngayon. So a lot of the things that we resolved more or less was on the issue of that accountability and justice. Of course, clearly she is not she is against, of course, the President Duterte's candidates and of course former Senator Bongbong Marcos. Klaro naman yan, which is really something which Makabayan, of course, treasures in the sense that we have always been forthright that we will be against Bongbong Marcos and any Duterte candidate in these coming elections because sinasabi nga namin, our main objective here is to end the tyranny and dynasty of President Duterte and the return of the Marcoses in Malacanang.
Okay, but specific to exacting accountability, should she win the presidency, how exactly does she intend to do this based on your conversation with her? For example, the drug war.
Maybe those specifics, it's probably better if you ask the Vice President. Parang sabi niya, I don't want my administration to be persecutory ba? Yung nagpe-persecute siya ng isang tao. So it would be fair in the sense that she will try to extract accountability from all those responsible without necessarily naming a particular person or a particular group. Kundi she doesn't want to be perceived as a vindictive president, but she will extract accountability. So, which is reasonable naman, no? Kasi tama naman that when a person wins the presidency, she may not want to look persecutory against the previous administration, but without letting go the commitment to go after those who committed human rights violations during the term of President Duterte.
And also, based on your conversation with the Vice President, which portions of the Makabayan platform seem palatable to the Vice President, but she said she would need to further study those?
Well, siguro let me put it this way, Christian, kasi it's better if you also ask their side, no? Kasi, for example, sa anti-terror law, for example, she promised na i-review yan. So, while we were going for the complete repeal, of course, for her, i-review natin ito. But she already said she cited a lot of provisions which she think is not compatible with constitutional rights. So we leave it at that. Kami naman, sabi ko nga, di naman namin ini-impose ng buong Makabayan platform ay susundin ng sino mang kandidato. Otherwise, di Makabayan member na lang siya. But we are reasonable naman to meet halfway with any presidential candidate who we believe naman will at least implement at least a minimum part ng plataforma ng Makabayan.
How about your push for free land distribution?
Well, si Vice President kasi has been a supporter of CARP. No? So ang Makabayan position naman is the next president should go beyond CARP. Para sa amin, CARP has been, of course, the basic concept of agrarian reform is there, but it wasn't able to deliver in the sense that na free ang naibigay ang lupa sa lahat ng magsasaka. So yeah, for her, at least the basic agreement na there, land reform will still be an issue to be confronted. And of course, CARP naman siya. In fact, she fought for CARPer during her time in Congress at the extension ng CARP. So kami naman kasi ang posisyon namin is beyond CARP na eh. So meron kaming bill doon, Genuine Agrarian Reform Bill, na kung saan sinasabi namin, libreng pamamahagi ng lupa sa lahat ng magsasaka. Gobyerno dapat ang magbayad ng lupa na yan. Just like many other countries who also implemented their own agrarian reform subsidized by the government so that ma-free naman ang magsasaka natin sa pagbayad ng amortisasyon na sometimes would be very difficult for poor farmers. She agreed, however, na dapat pag may distribute ng lupa, dapat ang, as we position in Makabayan also, full package yun. Hindi lang issue ng question ng lupa, kundi may equipment, may tulong, may kung ano pa mang mga ano ang gobyerno, capability building, etc. So in that sense, we agreed na full package ang land reform at hindi lang siya dapat parang namigay ka lang ng lupa tapos pabayaan mo na yung mga farmers.
Which is the problem that we're seeing now, no? So they cannot
Correct.
consider a lot. Kasi nga, may lupa, kapiraso, pero hindi naman kayang i-farm, for instance, right? Now,
correct. Yeah.
Okay, so you've heard the platform of the Vice President. You were able to present your platform as the Makabayan Bloc. And I think based on our previous conversation, you said that you had also spoken with Senator Manny Pacquiao and Manila Mayor Isko Moreno and even Senator Panfilo Lacson. So at this stage, has the Makabayan Bloc decided on which presidential aspirant to support in 2022?
Not yet, kasi ang ano na dyan, now we go back to our constituents. As I mentioned before, the 12th slot is of course important to us, pero ang hirap pag ma-confine lang doon kasi, parang ang sabi ko nga, parang what's in it for me? Na any other candidate would probably say na, oh, I'm in the slot now, so okay na ako, it doesn't matter the platform. Sa amin, importante ang platform. Which I'd like to explain, Christian. That's what we demand in all voters, right? That all voters not only look at the candidate, but the platform and the track record. Da sinasabi natin sa botante, huwag mong iboto dahil artista o kaya magaling sumayaw, kundi anong plataforma niya. So, para sa amin, we go back now to our constituents, the farmers, the workers, the urban poor, indigenous people, women, etc. And say, ito ang plataforma ni Vice President Robredo, ito ang plataforma ni, for example, Senator Manny Pacquiao. So, ano ang tingin nyo? You see, Christian, when we decide naman kasi, we hope na mag-unify ang buong Makabayan for that candidate. And for us to unify for that candidate, we need naman to convince them and fire them up and inspire them, in fact, na ipagkampanya ang kandidatong ito. And the best way to inspire them to campaign for a certain candidate is to inform them that the platform of that specific candidate, for example, considers them when he or she wins the presidency. It's not merely a question of defeating naman President Duterte or Marcos, which is very important, by the way. But also, they're also looking after the victory in the next 6 years, what's in it for the Filipino people in terms of jobs, employment, land, and other issues, especially on the economic field.
So when are you expected to make that decision on which presidential candidate to endorse?
Well, bagamat the election is still far away, it's still next year, we would really hope na we will decide soon. Hopefully very soon. Is it sometime before November 15? Maybe. Could it happen after November 15? Maybe. Depende. Kasi it's not easy to consult our members all over the country. Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao na yan. And the difficulties of COVID, etc., technology, and so on. It's not very easy for us. So, yeah, there will be a process, Christian. And good thing naman that many people are now not demanding na, oh, you endorse now. Kasi they now understand that we were sincere when we said that we wanted to talk with the Vice President on the issue platform. And secondly, that we really need to also process this among our members. We cannot dictate on our members without consulting them and involving them in the decision-making process, especially now that we have more or less, maybe not yet fully complete, but more or less we have an initial picture of the platforms of the different presidential candidates.
Okay. Now, since you were not included in the slate of Vice President Len Robredo, so basically you're free to join other slates. For instance, that of Mayor Isko Moreno or Senator Manny Pacquiao. Is that correct?
Well, the fact that we have not decided yet means I cannot speak on behalf of Makabayan to say which is which. No,
but basically you're free to join other slates, right?
In that sense that we haven't decided yet. So whoever the constituents of Makabayan believe now, this platform nito is better and so on. So it's up for the membership. The only thing with the Vice President Robredo's talk is, despite the fact that we did not agree we did not discuss the issue of slate. Of course, by that time, they've already decided, right? So, but then we still had this talk. There was a sort of a meeting of the minds that we need to cooperate for the defeat of Bongbong Marcos and the Duterte, for example. So, and I think, for example, in the case of Bongbong Marcos, we have always been in the forefront of opposing a return of the Marcoses to Malacanang. So, any cooperation on that aspect would be welcome to us. Cooperation with the Vice President, of course, anti-fraud, because as I mentioned previously, Makabayan has we have trained poll watchers around the country, or the machinery for that. They're trained for several elections. So the issue of guarding the votes of all opposition candidates, not just a particular candidate, to make sure that there is no electoral fraud to be committed by the Duterte and Marcos tandem, is something that we will go for, whoever we endorse as a presidential candidate.
Okay. Now, even if you were not included in the senatorial slate of Vice President Len Robredo, are you still open to endorsing her presidency? Not just cooperating.
Yes, because as I mentioned, there is this process where Makabayan will decide who to endorse, who to vote for. So that means President Robredo is on the table. I mean, the fact that she did not endorse me or she did not include me in her slate will be something that will be considered, but it will not be a decisive factor, I think, in the decision of Makabayan on who to endorse. We've always been sincere when we say that the issue that we wanted is not just the slate, but also the platform, and we are true to that. And we are now in the process of deciding on the basis of the platform exchanges that we had with the presidential candidates.
So your non-inclusion in the Robredo slate was not a deal breaker in terms of your possible endorsement of her presidential candidacy?
I don't think so. Why would we even talk about the platform with her when they've decided already that I won't be in the slate? It's not. We've always mentioned this before. There are some who say, no, your main issue there is you want to be in the slate. We've always said, hindi totoo yan. So I guess maybe people will now believe us naman when we say that platform is a very important issue for us. In the same way that's very important in our voters' education. We need to tell voters to look at the platform of candidates that they're going to vote for.
Okay. Now, speaking of senatorial slates, given our system here in the Philippines, electoral system, multi-member plurality system, do slates for senators even matter, really?
Of course, yes, in the sense that if you run under a presidential candidate, at least, especially for those without funding or resources, it can help a lot the candidate rather than going on your own as an independent candidate. Difficult, no? We've had that in 2019. I mean, I was independent in 2019, and in a way, essentially, if you look at Ocho Derecho too, there was no presidential candidate then. It's really difficult. So it's an advantage to be in a presidential slate. Having said that, of course, the track record of the candidate and kung ano man yung kanyang track record plays an important role also on whether the people will vote for you or support you or not support you at all, whether you're in a slate or not in a slate.
Okay. But I remember in 2010, right? when the Makabayan candidates also backed a presidential candidate then. That was Manny Villar, no? Did that really give you any advantage?
Well, yes. After discussing with the then presidential Manny Villar, in fact, Manny Villar written doon sa platform. He met with us, not in all, but met with Makabayan platform in several issues. Written pa yun. He signed it and he said, this is my commitment to Makabayan. So when we became part of it, of the slate, of course, yes, it helps kasi when the presidential candidate goes to the provinces, malaking tulong naman yan that you're with them, di ba? So, because it helps a lot, especially for those poor candidates like me, na wala naman kami, hindi naman kami nagpayaman sa Kongreso. So, it will appreciate that. It helps if you're in the presidential.
Now, let's talk about your platform in case you get elected as a senator finally. First bills that you would file if you get elected as a senator?
The bills I filed in Congress when I was there, so it's not only an issue of platform, but also an issue of track record on the issue of contractualization. For example, we filed that in Congress and we will fight for it in the Senate should I win in the senatorial election, considering that security of tenure is a very important component of workers' rights. Secondly, the COVID pandemic has to be addressed. However, our bill is like the Makabayan bill in Congress, which is free healthcare. Free healthcare means libreng gamot at libreng pagamot. Now, when pumunta ka sa ospital, libreng konsultasyon, libreng gamot. Kung kailangan mo ng operasyon, basta medically necessary, libre yon. Para sa amin, if we promise the people na free tuition fee for all, o hindi pwede namang free medical care for all. Is it feasible? Is it possible? Yes. We've calculated the amounts necessary for that, and we think if you cut away a lot of things, pork barrel, corruption, all these walang kakwenta-kwentang projects, we can fund a free health program for all. Not exactly the same as that of Thailand, but very similar to the capacity of Thailand. Thailand is not as rich as it's probably richer by us, ilang paligo lang naman. But Thailand managed to do a good healthcare. So healthcare talaga, not only because of the COVID pandemic, but even after the COVID pandemic, a lot of people still have problems with health. Ang mahal ng pagamot, mahal magpa-opera, mahal mag-dialysis, lahat yan. For me, I will push for that in the Senate. And I think we can really manage to have a free healthcare for all if only the government will be sympathetic to such an endeavor.
So you need a president who will be very, very supportive to such proposals, which to a lot of people might seem very radical, right? Because number one is the question of affordability.
Yes. To some, it may be radical, but we proposed so many things before that people said that's too radical. When I proposed 2,000 dagdag sa SSS pension, people said, "Oy, 200 pesos lang nga, hindi pwede. How much more 2,000?" But look, we got there. Kalahati na ibigay ni President Duterte, but still, yeah.
But I think the other side of that, yung SSS, we still need to see. It remains to be seen how that would actually affect the actuarial life of the SSS, right?
Well, actually now, if you look at SSS, they're no longer citing the bankruptcy rule. Well, their bankruptcy argument. When I filed that, they all kept on threatening people, we're going to go bankrupt, we're going to go bankrupt. So where is it now? For me, there's a well-studied plan, and there's no way SSS can escape that obligation to increase pension. So in any case, these are radical changes. But I think the situation of our economy and our people requires radical changes. That's why probably an activist senator is needed in the Senate, precisely to think of these radical ideas to ensure that this novel idea called free health for all is something that will reverberate in the Senate halls. And if we are lucky, then we can push for it. Alam mo, suntok sa buwan, but kung hindi ka susuntok sa buwan, di paano mo masuntok yun? Kailangan sumuntok ka. And I think it's not really suntok sa buwan as they feel. We have outlaid about 500 more or less, 500 billion pesos more or less, whether you calculate that. But in the end, we will see kung ano ang kakayanan natin. Basta we'll strive for that, na libre ang paggamot sa lahat. At grabe ang issue ng healthcare sa atin. Pre-COVID and now with COVID and after COVID, kailangan pa rin ang free healthcare para sa lahat ng Pilipino.
Okay. Finally, Attorney Colmenares, let's talk about the meeting over the weekend between former Senator Bongbong Marcos and Davao City Mayor Sara Duterte. The common observation is that that was suggestive, at least the optics of that, were suggestive of a possible alliance in the offing for the 2022 elections. They agree with the observation also that the fact that they are continuing their discussions, their talks. This now makes it even more urgent for the opposition to unite, or the non-Duterte forces to unite in time for the 2022 elections.
Well, whether they unite or not, Marcos is a very strong candidate with a lot of resources and a lot of the narratives in social media used by him in so many years is now propelling him to become a very formidable candidate. So whether they unite or not, yes, you're correct there. The more emphasis we have for a unified opposition, because it's not easy, especially if they unite. Whether they unite or not. But one thing going for us in the opposition, the fact is President Duterte, in my opinion, Christian, is now a lame duck president. Sino pa ba? who will believe this incumbent president who doesn't even have a candidate, right? In the presidential election, so to speak. So for me, that's the major thing here. And the opposition, I think, should take to heart that despite the fact that we are still on the road to uniting, the Duterte administration is basically a lame duck now, and it will gradually become more lame duck as the months go by, when the people will begin talking about the new president rather than the incumbent president. The only thing we need to do is we campaign hard against President Duterte, and we really need to deliver the message that for those who agree with us that Duterte is not the best president we've had and should never be president again, they should not shift to Bongbong Marcos, but rather go to the exact opposite of President Duterte, who is in the opposition. So that's something we need to tweak there to convince people who are disgruntled with President Duterte from going to Bongbong Marcos on the basis that maybe he is not related to Duterte. But for us, the Marcoses and the Duterte are two faces of one single coin. They're the two faces of Janus, to speak. But they should rather go to the opposition, which has been in contrast to President Duterte for so many years.
Okay. Attorney Neri Colmenares, thank you for joining us tonight, sir.
Maraming salamat po. Thank you. Good evening.
We're going to take a quick break. After the fact, we'll be right back.